She stood tied to a splintered fence post behind the saloon, arms stretched overhead like a scarecrow left to rot. Mud clung to her ankles, and her bare feet shifted slightly when the breeze picked up. Her dress, thin, muslin, soaked through, stuck to her like paper on skin. She didn't cry, didn't move, just breathed in silence, maybe 12 years old, maybe less. A ghost in the middle of town, and nobody seemed to care. The regulars drifted past her, laughing, spitting, gambling. They weren't here for her. They were here for the girls upstairs, the whiskey, the smoke-filled games. A child tied to a post just added to the ambiance, something to look at between rounds. Someone muttered, "Gambler's kid. Can't pay his debts. Using her to work it off." No one questioned it. No one stopped it, except Wade Coulter. He rode in slow, saddle-worn, coat frayed at the edges. His boots were dusty, his face unshaved, and his eyes missed nothing. Wade hadn't planned to stop in town, just meant to drop off tools for sharpening, pick up nails, maybe coffee if the price wasn't too high. But his horse stopped short beside the alley, and when Wade looked, he saw her, small, thin as fence wire, wrists raw, and eyes blank as winter sky. He didn't speak at first, just sat in the saddle watching. A voice broke the air. $12, someone called out. She's worth that for a week. Permanent costs more. The gambler stepped forward, sour breath, thin hair, and a half-grin too slick for daylight. He yanked the rope like she was livestock. She can cook, clean, don't talk back. Dumb as dirt, strong as hell. Doesn't eat much, neither. Wade dismounted. He didn't say a word. Just reached into his coat and pulled out a cloth bundle. Coins clinked. The gambler squinted. 15? He asked. Wade nodded. Permanent. The gambler laughed. Ain't buying her, huh? Just settling a debt? Same thing. He let the rope drop in the dust. Wade walked over, crouched, and cut. The girl loose with a small knife. Her arms dropped like they'd forgotten how to fall. She stumbled, and he caught her. Not gentle, but not rough. She looked up at him, startled, then looked away. Her face stayed blank. No tears, just silence. They left without another word. Wade didn't make her ride behind him. Instead, he let her sit atop the mule, reins looped to his horse. She clung to the saddle horn with both hands and stared at the horizon, never looking back. Dust rose behind them, swallowed the town whole. His ranch sat 10 miles west, tucked between bare cottonwoods and weathered bluffs. The barn leaned hard from the last storm. The roof was torn open in 2 places. Chickens wandered loose, pecking at nothing. A fence post by the gate had snapped halfway, hanging on by splinters. Wade helped her down from the mule. She took in the house, a low cabin with 1 crooked window, the smell of damp wood and beans thick in the air. Inside, a pot bubbled on the stove. A folded blanket sat on the cot beside the hearth. "That's yours," he said. She stood still, hands at her sides. "You hungry?" She nodded, almost imperceptibly. He spooned out beans into a dented tin bowl and placed it on the table. She sat. Didn't touch the spoon, just stared. "You don't gotta eat fast," Wade said. "Quieter now." She picked up the spoon carefully, like it might snap in her grip. The first taste made her flinch, not from heat, but from something deeper. He realized then, she didn't know what warm food was supposed to feel like. Not in her hands, not in her mouth. She didn't finish, just whispered, "Thank you." Her voice was soft, like it came from under floorboards. Wade didn't ask questions. He didn't offer stories. He just checked the fire, lit a lamp, and said, "I don't lock doors. You're safe here." She nodded but didn't move. He stepped outside to unhitch the mule. The wind had teeth now. Coyotes called from the ridge. The stars came out sharp and cold. When he returned, she was curled on the cot, blanket pulled tight around her, arms folded like she was still bound. Her eyes were closed, but she didn't look asleep. Around midnight, a floorboard creaked. Wade stirred, his hand already resting on the rifle leaning by his chair. The girl stood near the fire, barefoot, eyes glassy. "Don't lock me in the barn," she said. "I won't." She didn't explain. He didn't ask. She turned and walked. Back to the cot. Lay down again. Didn't speak. Didn't sleep. Neither did he. By morning, frost lined the window. The sun rose slow, bleeding orange across the canyon wall. Wade poured water into the kettle. His hand trembled a little. Cold, he told himself. The girl, still nameless, still silent, was awake, staring at the ceiling. She hadn't moved all night. And Wade, a man who'd spent his life building fences, realized maybe this time he was meant to tear one down. Rosie didn't speak much that first week. Not because she was stubborn, but because words didn't seem to know where to land. They hovered in her throat, unformed and useless, like dust that never settled. She answered questions with nods or shrugs. Sometimes not at all. Mostly she just watched. Wade, the house, the land. On the second morning, Wade found her standing barefoot on the porch before sunrise, arms wrapped tight around herself, staring out across the frost-bitten field. The hem of her dress fluttered in the sough. Wind. She didn't turn when he stepped outside. He simply handed her a wool scarf and pointed toward the chicken coop. Corn's in the sack. They get mean if you're late. She nodded and walked, careful and slow, her feet crunching through icy grass. When she returned, her fingers were red, straw stuck to her dress. Wade expected her to ask for gloves. She didn't. He baked bread, once a week, more out of habit than hunger. That morning, the house filled with the scent of yeast and smoke. The loaf came out a little burnt on the bottom, but the crust was golden. He set a slice in front of her beside a tin of honey. You can eat it. Rosie stared at the bread like it was a trap. All of it, he said. She lifted her eyes. Should I save some for later? He leaned back, letting the chair creak. There'll be more later. Still, she tore off only a small piece and held it to her mouth with hesitation. When she finally took a bite, something changed in her face. Not joy, not relief, just surprise. It was warm. Later, she swept the floor even though it didn't need sweeping. Then she folded the blanket on her cot. Twice. Then again. Wade tried to tell her she didn't have to, but the words caught in his throat. Every time he opened his mouth, her shoulders tensed like she was bracing for something unseen. She didn't know what to do with peace. Not yet. In the evenings, Wade sat near the fire with his coffee. Rosie sat across from him, hands folded in her lap, unmoving. He didn't force conversation, just let the silence stretch between them like a new plank, bridge, untested, but holding. One night she pointed at the rifle leaning against the wall. You hunt. Sometimes, he said. Coyotes mostly. Lost a few hens last spring. She nodded. I can help. With chickens, I mean. You already are. The next day, she beat him to the coop. He found her there at dawn, murmuring something under her breath. Not words, just a soft, broken hum, like a song she'd half forgotten. He pretended not to hear it. By the third day, she asked where the well was. Wade showed her. She hauled water in a bucket nearly half her size and spilled more. Then she carried, but didn't complain. She kept at it, 4 trips in total until the tin wash basin was full. That night, she soaked her feet in silence. I can fix you some boots, he said. Might be too big, but they'll keep the frost off. She looked at him. Why? Wade blinked. Because it's cold. She didn't argue, just nodded and accepted the offer like it was a rare coin. He found a pair of his late wife's boots in a trunk, lined them with dry grass, and left them by her cot. In the morning, they were gone. He never asked if they fit. They settled into something like rhythm. Not comfort, not yet, but something steadier than survival. Rosie followed Wade when he checked the fences, kept pace behind the mule. When she tripped on a loose rock and bloodied her knee, she bit her lip and kept walking. Wade handed her a square of cloth. Ain't ashamed to hurt. She wiped the blood without a word. On the 4th night, Wade caught her crouched under the porch near the wheelbarrow. She wasn't sleeping, just hiding. What are you doing out here? He asked. Her voice was a whisper. Just checking. For what? If the door locks from the outside. He crouched beside her, voice low. It don't. Nothing here. Does. She didn't respond, but the next night she slept closer to the fire. He noticed her watching the window during meals, eyes drifting toward the dirt road like she expected someone to appear. Her shoulders never relaxed. She chewed quietly, precisely, and folded her napkin after every bite like it mattered. She don't know what to do with silence, Wade muttered one night as he tossed another log on the fire. Or warm bread. By the end of the week, she stopped freezing every time the wind slammed the door. She even smiled once, just a flicker, quick and cautious, when one of the hens hopped into the feed sack and got stuck. Wade reached in and came out with a furious ball of feathers, and Rosie snorted before she could stop herself. He didn't say anything, but he noticed. The next morning, she swept the porch without being asked. After supper, she washed the dishes and set them out in a perfect row, edges aligned. Then she sat, folded her hands again, and hummed the same tune from before, only this time a little louder. That night, Wade stood outside, looking up at the sky. The stars were sharp. Coyotes howled somewhere near the ridge. The wind smelled like dry earth and pine. Inside, Rosie was curled on the cot, arms wrapped around a pillow now, not herself. He watched her chest rise and fall with slow, even breaths. And for the first time since bringing her home, Wade realized something small but sure had shifted. She was still scared, but she was learning to breathe. The wind had shifted that morning, dry, sour, and low to the ground. Wade noticed it before. He stepped outside before he saw the dust trail rising from the east road. Something about the quiet made his knuckles tighten. He stood on the porch, arms folded, eyes fixed on the horizon. Rosie was inside, sweeping the hearth, her sleeves rolled up and braid looped tight. She hadn't noticed yet. 3 riders came into view. One wore a preacher's collar, crisp and clean despite the trail dust. Another had a crooked badge on his vest and a mustache trimmed too neat. The third rode slow, heavy in the saddle. Eli Dobbins. Same sneer. Same eyes. Brother of the man Wade had paid weeks ago to release a child tied to a fence. They dismounted before reaching the gate. "Morning," Wade called, voice flat. The preacher stepped forward. "You Wade Coulter?" "That's right." "I'm Reverend Harlan. This here's Deputy Stokes, and this man is Mr. Eli Dobbins." Wade didn't move. "What's the visit about?" Eli spat into the dirt. "My brother made a mistake. He sold something he didn't have the right to." "She's not something," Wade said. The preacher raised a hand. "Let's keep it civil. Mr. Dobbins claims you're harboring property, his brother's legal ward, sold under false pretenses." Wade's jaw flexed. "She was chained to a post. I gave coin to get her free." "Didn't absolve anything," said Deputy Stokes. "Law sees her as a transaction gone sideways. There's paperwork, witnesses." "She's a child," Wade said. "Not a mule." Eli stepped closer. "We're not here to fight, just to collect what's ours." Behind Wade, the door creaked. Rosie had stepped out, hands still dusted with ash from the hearth. She stood small but straight in the doorway. Eli grinned. "There she is. Rosie, come on now. This man's done his part." She didn't move. "Girl," he growled. "You were promised. We got a place for you." Wade stepped between them. "She's not going anywhere." Deputy Stokes rested his hand near his belt. "You really want to be on the record as obstructing the law?" "You bring papers," Wade said. "Signed, sealed, stamped. Until then, you've got no claim." "We'll be back in 7 days," Reverend Harlan said. "You do well to prepare." Wade nodded once. "I already am." They mounted up and rode off without another word. Dust swallowed them whole. Rosie didn't speak until they were out of sight. "They'll come back," she said quietly. "Yeah," Wade replied. She stared down the road for a long time before whispering, "What if they bring more men?" "Then, we bring more fence posts," he said. She looked at him, puzzled. "Start with what you can fix," he added. That afternoon, they rebuilt the southern fence. Wade dug the holes. Rosie carried the rails. Her arms ached by the third post, but she didn't stop. Blisters rose on her palms. She wrapped them in cloth and kept going. At one point, Wade paused. You don't have to prove anything. Rosie looked up, breathless. I'm not. She didn't explain further. He didn't press. At dinner, she spooned stew into both bowls and lit the lamp without being told. The fire popped in the hearth, casting gold across her face. Wade sat across from her, watching her eyes dart toward the window now and then. They might come at night, she said. I'll hear them. She nodded and stirred her stew slowly. Before bed, she folded her blanket just once. No extra corners, no perfect lines. Just once. That night, Wade sat in his chair with the rifle across his knees. Rosie lay on the cot, eyes open, facing the ceiling. She didn't tremble. She didn't flinch. Just breathed, steady and slow. In the morning, they started early. Rosie chopped vegetables for supper. She scattered feed in the coop, hauled water from the well. She fixed the hinge on the back door using Wade's tools without being asked. When he caught her wiping the windowsill, he said, "You know you don't have to do all this." "I know," she said, and kept scrubbing. They spoke little, but between each task, something unspoken stretched between them, like a thread being tied tighter by the hour. 2 days later, a neighbor rode by. Clayton Harlow. He nodded at Wade from the well. "Heard you got a girl living here now," he said. Wade didn't answer. "Not my business. Just town's buzzing. Some folks say you done right. Others." Wade raised an eyebrow. "And you?" "I think what a man chooses to protect tells you who he is." With that, Clayton tipped his hat to Rosie, who'd stepped outside quietly, and rode off. She watched him go, arms crossed. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, Rosie carried a bundle of firewood to the porch. Wade met her there. "You think they'll bring guns?" she asked. "Maybe." She stared out toward the fence line they'd just finished. "Can I have a knife?" she asked. Wade looked at her. "You know how to use one?" She nodded. He disappeared inside and returned with his wife's old carving blade. He handed it to Rosie, handle first. She turned it over in her hand, ran her thumb along the spine, then nodded once and tucked it into her belt. They stood there for a while in the cool wind, side by side. "I don't know what I am here," she said quietly. "Not family, not help." Wade shook his head. "Don't need a word, you're here, that's enough." She didn't reply. But later, when she cleaned the dishes and folded her blanket again, she hummed that half-song under her breath and added a few new notes. And Wade, watching from the doorway, realized she was calling him family, just not with words. The 7th. Day dawned windless and pale. No riders, no dust trail. Just silence stretched across the ridge like a taut wire waiting to snap. Wade rose early, brewed coffee, and kept his rifle by the door, same as every morning since the men first came. Rosie was already awake feeding the hens. She moved quickly now, confident, quiet, precise. The knife at her belt flashed once as she turned, then vanished again beneath her apron. She didn't say much, but her posture had changed. Her fear had been folded into something sharper, more solid. By mid-morning, Wade was chopping kindling when the dog lifted its head and growled low. He paused. A creak reached him, wagon wheels on hard dirt. He straightened, axe gripped tight. Rosie stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on her. "Why?" "Skirt. It's not them," she said softly. A single wagon rolled into view. The mule pulling it moved slow, deliberate. On the bench sat a woman, back hunched, hair streaked with dust, a cane propped against her leg. Her clothes were thin, shoes worn nearly through. She looked like she'd walked through every mile of sorrow to get here. Rosie didn't move. Her breath caught. The wagon stopped just short of the porch. The woman climbed down, slow, shaking, and dropped her cane the moment her feet touched earth. "Mama?" Rosie whispered. The woman froze, then fell to her knees with a sob. "Rosie. Oh, God. Rosie." Rosie stepped forward, her face crumbling. She dropped to the dirt and wrapped her arms around the woman, clinging like the world might end if she let go. The woman sobbed into Rosie's hair. "I came back. I told them I'd come back," she cried. "I begged them not to hurt you." "They sold you," Rosie whispered. "They said you ran." "I didn't. I tried to come back, but they told me you were gone." "I didn't stop looking." Wade stepped back onto the porch, lowering the axe. He stayed quiet, letting the moment unfold without interruption. The mule snorted and stamped its foot. Rosie finally stood, pulling her mother with her. She turned to Wade. "This is my mama," she said, voice shaking but proud. "I figured," Wade replied. The woman nodded toward him, wiping her face. "I'm Nora. I got a place, near Cotton Bend, a shack, barely standing. But it's home. I came to take her there if she'll come." Wade studied Nora. She was no older than 30, but looked twice that. Her arms bore bruises. Her eyes were hollowed from grief. Still, she stood straight beside Rosie, her hand held tight. Rosie looked at Wade. "Will you come with us?" He blinked. "Why?" "Help us fix it, just for a while, till it's safe." He glanced at the house, the stove, the tools, the cot, no longer empty. "All right," he said. They packed by noon. Nora's mule was slow but steady. Wade saddled his horse and followed beside the wagon on foot. Rosie rode in back, her mother beside her, wrapped in a borrowed blanket. They moved slow, partly for the mule, partly for the weight of everything they carried. The road to Cotton Bend wound through scrubland where trees grew bent and low, branches clawing at the sky. They passed dry creek beds, rusted fence lines, and silent fields. No one talked much. Nora dozed. Rosie held her hand the entire way. By the time the sun began to fall, the shack appeared, a leaning structure nestled against a rock ridge, patched with tin and warped timber. A crooked windmill creaked in the wind. Smoke from an old chimney curled upward. "That it?" Wade asked. Rosie nodded. Nora didn't answer. She just stared, like remembering every bruise she'd earned beneath that roof. The door groaned open with a shove. Inside, the space was small but dry. A table, one cot, a few shelves with old jars. A child's drawing, yellowed with time, hung on the wall. A woman, a girl, and a red house. The color faded but still there. Rosie touched it with her fingers. "You kept this?" Nora smiled faintly. "It was all I had of you for a while." Wade said nothing. He found dry wood and lit the stove. The flames took slowly, but they took. He stirred beans in a pot and passed bread around. That night Rosie cooked flatbread. Nora fell asleep against the wall, murmuring in her sleep. Rosie sat near Wade at the fire, chin on her knees. "Do you think this place can be home again?" she asked. He looked around. "It's got people in it." "That's a start," she nodded slowly. "Thank you for coming." He shrugged. "Didn't want to say goodbye yet." She smiled, small but real. Wade slept outside near the wagon. The stars were faint, muted by smoke from a distant fire. Coyotes called from beyond the ridge, and somewhere in the dark, he heard Rosie humming that same quiet tune. In the morning, the wind picked up. The scent of smoke turned sharper. He woke with a start. The ridge behind the shack glowed faint orange. "Fire," he muttered. Rosie was already up, barefoot in the grass, staring at the horizon. "It's moving," she said. "Fast." Nora stumbled out. "What do we do?" "We run," Wade said. "Now." But Rosie didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the tiny shed beside the shack. "Mama's things are in there. My books, her papers." Wade looked at the sky. "Not worth your life." "What if we don't get back?" Nora's face folded in on itself. Wade didn't wait. "I'll get it. You two get the mule ready." The shed's lock was rusted, but gave way to his knife. Inside, he grabbed what he could, papers, books, a wrapped bundle of herbs, and bolted as the ash began to fall. By noon, the ridge was burning. Trees crackled. The sky turned red. They rode hard toward the creek. Behind them, flames swallowed the shack whole. Nora wept. Rosie didn't. She just said, "It took everything. Again, Wade looked at her. Not everything. They reached the water's edge, safe for now, and under the shade of a blackened pine, Rosie leaned her head against Wade's shoulder, not saying family, but meaning it just the same. Smoke had a way of arriving before the flames, low, oily, creeping like a warning too polite to knock. Wade smelled it first, faint in the wind, bitter and unnatural. He rose from where he'd slept near the wagon, heart thudding. The horizon to the west pulsed faint orange, as if the ridge itself had swallowed fire. Rosie was already outside, barefoot, in the grass, staring at the glow. "It's moving," she said. Wade followed her gaze. "Wind's pulling it east. If it jumps the canyon, we've got hours, maybe less." Nora stumbled from the shack, coughing, still wrapped in the blanket. She'd slept in. "What do we do?" she asked. Wade didn't hesitate. "We get out. Now." He turned toward the wagon, already loosening the mule's reins. But Rosie didn't follow. She stood frozen, eyes locked on the crooked shed beside the shack. "Mama's things are in there. My books, her papers, everything." Wade shook his head. "Not worth your life." Rosie turned to her mother. "What if we don't come back?" Nora's face twisted. "Baby, please." Wade made the choice for them. "I'll get it. You two load up." He sprinted toward the shed. The heat was rising now. The lock had rusted to a nail. He wedged it. Loose with his knife, shoved the door open. Inside, a trunk, a stack of books, a bundle wrapped in old cloth. He grabbed everything he could carry, tucked it against his chest, and ran. Ash began to fall like gray snow. By the time he reached the wagon, the wind had picked up. The mule pawed nervously, Rosie already holding the reins, Nora clutching her satchel to her chest. "You got it?" Rosie asked. Wade nodded, breath shallow. "Everything I could grab." They rolled out fast, the wheels groaning, the trail uneven. Behind them, the sky turned sickly red. Trees cracked. Somewhere, a hawk screamed. Rosie didn't look back. Nora did, and covered her mouth. By late afternoon, they reached the creek. The water was shallow, clean. Wade led the mule to drink. Rosie knelt beside a smooth rock and just stared into the current. Nora sat under a cottonwood, face in her hands, silent. Wade built a small fire away from the brush, just enough to boil water. He handed Rosie a tin cup. She didn't take it right. "Away! They always take it," she said. "What? Every time. First our town, then the brothel, then the shack. Every time we build something, it burns." Wade sat beside her, knees creaking. "Fire don't take what's alive," he said. "It only burns what's already gone." She blinked. "How do you know?" "Because we're still here." She didn't answer, just sipped the water, eyes fixed on the opposite bank. That night, they didn't talk much. Wade spread his bedroll near the fire. Nora lay with her back to them, curled tight beneath her coat. Rosie sat by the flames, the wrapped bundle from the trunk in her lap. She didn't open it, just kept her hands on it like she needed to prove it was real. Later, she whispered, "You could have let it burn." Wade stared into the fire. "Didn't want you to lose again. It wasn't yours to save." "I know." She turned to look at him. "Why'd you do it?" He thought a moment. "Because you asked. And because it mattered." She pulled the blanket tighter. "They said I was property, like a horse, like land. They were wrong." "How do you know I'm not?" Wade looked at her, face solemn. "Because you fight like someone with something to lose. That's not property. That's a person." She didn't reply, but when he lay down for the night, she moved her bedroll a few feet closer to his, just enough to feel the warmth. The fire burned low. The creek whispered in the dark. Coyotes called somewhere past the ridge, but they were far off. Wade watched the stars until his eyes blurred. In the morning, the smoke was thinner. The wind had shifted again. Rosie woke first, wandered to the water and washed her hands, rubbing at the ash that clung to her wrists. Nora brewed weak coffee with trembling hands. "I don't know where we'll go now," she said softly. "We'll figure it out," Wade replied. Rosie walked back holding something close, a book. Slightly scorched, edges curled but intact. She opened it. Inside, a child's drawing had survived, barely. The red crayon had faded, but the shapes were still there. A house, a woman, a girl, 3 stick figures holding hands. She showed it to Wade. "Guess the fire didn't win everything," she said. "No," he replied. "Not even close. They stayed by the creek that day. No one spoke of moving on, not yet. They needed to breathe, to wait for the smoke to clear." That evening, Rosie helped Wade gather wood. They moved side by side, quiet and efficient. She didn't ask where they'd sleep next. She didn't ask what they'd lost. She already knew. But her steps were sure. That night, as they sat by the fire, Rosie looked at him across the flames. "I used to believe fire meant the end of everything," she said. "Now I think maybe it just shows you what matters." Wade poked the embers, sending sparks into the air. "That's a hard thing to learn." She smiled, small and tired. So was breathing. They didn't speak again that night. Just sat there. One old man, one girl with ash still tangled in her braid, watching the flames burn clean. The wind smelled wrong before they even crested the last hill. Wade slowed the mule, eyes narrowed, boots heavy with dread. Behind him, Rosie and Nora rode quiet, both sensing it too. The chimney was gone. The barn doors hung open, one ripped off its hinges. Fences lay scattered like bones across the field. The closer they got, the more certain it became. This wasn't the work of weather or time. Wade dismounted first. The front gate had been torn free and tossed aside. Charred wood smoldered near the chicken coop. The porch steps were blackened. But the house still stood. Rosie climbed down silently, eyes scanning everything. Her face didn't change, but her hands clenched tight. Inside, the cabin had been ransacked. Furniture overturned. The tin bowls dented and strewn. Wade's late wife's rocking chair lay in pieces, hacked apart with something sharp. The rifle was gone. On the front door, scrawled in black charcoal, was one word. Thief Nora covered her mouth. Rosie stepped forward. She didn't flinch. She traced the letters with her fingers, slow and deliberate. "They want us scared," she said. Wade turned. Her voice was calm. Too calm. "This was Dobbins," he muttered. "Probably came back when we didn't." He walked the perimeter. Tracks in the dirt. 3 men at least. One had a limp, dragging one boot. Wade knelt, pressed his palm into the print. "Eli." Rosie stood behind him. "We fix it." Wade looked at her. "We will." They got to work. That night they slept, in shifts. Wade sat by the fire with Nora's borrowed knife tucked into his boot. The shotgun lay across his lap. Rosie didn't sleep, just watched the door, her eyes like flint. In the morning, they began clearing the wreckage. Nora righted the chairs. Rosie swept broken glass into a pail and dragged it out herself. Wade salvaged what he could from the tool shed. They patched the front step first, then the fence. By the 3rd day, word had traveled. Hank Sutter arrived first, holding a sack of nails and a coil of wire. "Didn't figure you for one to need help," he said. Wade didn't smile. "Didn't figure I'd ask." "You didn't," Hank replied. By noon, 3 more men came. One brought blankets, another offered stew. No one asked questions. They just worked. Rosie stayed close to the fire, hammering planks into place. She didn't speak unless spoken to. She didn't flinch when the hammer hit wrong and split the wood. She just started again. Nora cooked quietly, tending to the stew like it was sacred. That evening, as the sun slid behind the canyon, a lone rider approached. Eli Dobbins. He didn't come with law or preacher, just that same crooked grin and eyes full of something sour. He dismounted slow, boots crunching on gravel. The work paused. "Looks like you got yourself a party," he said. Wade didn't reach for the shotgun. He walked down the porch steps with slow, deliberate steps. Eli spat. "You think this makes you right? You burned my home. She's still not yours. You got no papers, no claim." Rosie stepped off the porch. She didn't wait for permission. She walked right up to Eli, stood eye to eye. "You don't get to talk about me," she said. "You don't own me," Eli chuckled. "Little wildcat thinks she's grown." She slapped him. Hard. The sound cracked like a gunshot. He stumbled back, stunned. The men behind Wade didn't move. They didn't need to. The silence said enough. "You want to fight?" Wade asked. "Pick one." Eli's hand hovered near his belt, but he looked around. Too many eyes. Too many hands holding tools that could become weapons. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "No," Rosie said. "You will." Eli mounted up. He didn't speak again, just turned his horse and rode off into the dark. Rosie stood there a moment longer, breathing hard. Wade placed a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" "I was scared," she said. "I know. But I didn't run." "No," he said, "you didn't." That night, they ate together. The fire burned steady. Nora sang an old lullaby while stirring the stew. Rosie rested her head on her mother's shoulder, the tension finally giving way. Wade sat back in his chair. For the first time in weeks, he let himself close his eyes for a moment, just one breath's worth of peace. Later, as Rosie washed the dishes, she looked at Wade. "Do you still think I'm a child?" He shook his head. "I think you're becoming something bigger than most grown men." She didn't smile. Not quite. But her shoulders dropped. She turned back to the dishes. Outside, the wind carried no smoke. No threats. Just the faint sound of frogs down by the creek. And inside, for the first time, Rosie didn't feel like a guest. She felt like someone who had earned her place,